Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Penny Heaton. I'm the Global Therapeutic Area Head for Infectious Disease and Vaccines and Global Public Health at Johnson & Johnson. And it's such an honor for me to serve as the chair of today's webinar and to hear from our 2023 Prix Galien USA Award winners. So to kick off the new year, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share some of the highlights as well as recognize some of the incredible achievements of the 2023 Prix Galien USA winners. Now, each year, as you know, the Galien Foundation convenes its global community to realize its mission to foster, to recognize, and to reward excellence in scientific innovation that's going to improve the status of human health. It does this through recognition by an independent committee of 12 scientific researchers and academic leaders, including 3 Nobel laureates of outstanding private sector achievement in the discovery and the development of new treatments for deadly diseases. We also sponsor biopharmaceutical, vaccines, medtech, and digital application awards programs in the US, and also 14 other countries, as well as Africa and India, and now globally through the Prix Galien International Awards. Now, the Galien Foundation just hosted the first Prix Galien award ceremony in India, in New Delhi. With a rich history of scientific contributions there to medicine and to public health, we know that India is such a key player, a very important player in the production of medicines, both with respect to just the sheer volume and the value worldwide of what they do. They're a global leader in the production of generic drugs and vaccines, and they have a mission to really ensure accessibility to treatment to the underprivileged. So quite an honor to have been there in New Delhi earlier this year. The Galien Foundation also hosts public forums to advocate for best practices supportive of greater private sector biopharma innovation. The Galien USA Forum, which is held annually in New York, is just one example. There, among other topics, we get to hear from the world's leading healthcare organizations to discuss the past, the present, and the future of human health. Finally, promoting partnerships between the private sector and biopharma and key public stakeholders like government, academia, NGOs, patient groups, and the media is really important. In this regard, the Foundation's Pro Bono Humanum Award, launched in 2007 by Galien co-founder, author, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Dr. Rizzo, has made it a rising influential force behind the global movement for health equity, where medicine's innovation is advanced as a human right, health for all. So now I want to transition to our guests today. We had a very productive week in October 2023. We had 15 webinars over 3 days. They covered each of 177 products from 164 companies in 15 different therapeutic areas. They were nominated by the awards committee for recognition as winner of a Prix Galien Award in 7 different categories. And these categories included Best Biotechnology Product, Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Product for Rare and Orphan Diseases, Incubators, Accelerators, and Equity, and Best Startup. So we're going to hear now from 2 representatives of this year's company award recipients in Best Digital Health Solution and Incubators, Accelerators, and Equity. So guests, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with Michelle? Could you introduce yourselves to the group that we have here today with us on the webinar?
Sure, and thank you so much, Penny and the Galien, for this exciting opportunity to, reflect on 2023 and just the overall accomplishments, I think, of the Galien Foundation. My name is Michelle Longmire. I'm the CEO of Medable. A little bit about my background: I'm a physician scientist and really started Medable with the core goal of accelerating clinical development. As we all know, it takes a long time and a lot of money to create new therapies, and novel treatments for disease are one of the major levers in reducing human suffering and improving human health. So our team at Medable essentially provides technology to accelerate clinical development. And so excited to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Robert, would you please introduce yourself all the way from Nairobi, I understand.
Yes, indeed. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Robert Karanja. I'm a biomedical scientist by background. And last 8 years of my life, I've been at Vilgro Africa as co-founder and chief innovation officer. At Vilgro, what we do is we support health and life sciences startups. We're an early stage business incubator and pre-seed, seed investor working across the continent. We've been able to support over 100 startups in over 27 countries on the continent. And my background as a biomedical scientist, as academia slash development entrepreneur, has been one of just trying to understand how do we change the narrative for the health sector in this continent. Lots of amazing promise. We're the youngest region globally, which has a lot of pluses, but then how do we ensure that we get a population dividend? And we can't do that if we're not healthy. So that is very much our true north in terms of the direction we look at as Vilgro.
Yeah. So thank you, Robert. And again, thank you both for being here today. And I'd like to just dive right into the conversation. I have a few questions that I want to ask each of you, but of course, please feel free to jump in and ask questions of each other. Just looking forward to a good dialogue here. So Michelle, perhaps we'll start with you. So what did it take to get your product, which is a different kind of product, but as you said, what did that support in getting and accelerating clinical trials so that transformational medicines can get to patients faster? But what did it take to get that over the finish line and actually get to commercial success?
Sure. As a startup, I think there's many horizons of commercial success. One of, the core benchmarks we look at is how many phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials have we been a part of? And at this point, it's around north of 300. And so I think what that says is that there is real momentum in the adoption of new technology. Medable is a platform for decentralized clinical trials. So what we do is we provide technology to patients and sites that enables better access and ideally speed and scale to the clinical development process. We work across therapeutic areas. And I would say pre-pandemic, the use of this technology was a bit of an edge case. Of course, because I think everyone developing drugs encounters access challenges, but it's daunting to think of taking an approach you've never taken before if you're in the shoes of the developer or the clinical team. So in the pandemic, this approach became essentially a required approach. And through that, pharma developed the muscle, understood, how to use new technologies, how you could use mobile and sensors to gather patient data remotely. And I think also the regulators from across Europe and the United States started to provide core guidance that also gave people the direction that we needed. Now, fast forward to where we are today, and decentralized clinical trial methodologies have become a core strategy to most clinical development plans. It's not to say that every endpoint is captured remotely, but it's to say when we look at the clinical trial design, we want to ask, how can we improve patient access? How can we make this clinical trial accessible in communities and geographies that were historically underserved? And how can we reduce the number of patient visits so that we have better patient retention? So I think that, part of it was this broad circumstance of the pandemic that enabled our partners to get more comfortable with novel technologies. Of course, that was a set of circumstances we would never want to revisit. Where we are today is with that muscle and experience. Now, drug developers are far more comfortable. I'd say the other kind of final point on what has helped the success and adoption is really the data to show that this process adds value. This new innovative approach is important. And we worked with the Tufts Center for Drug Development and published really a milestone publication that showed a 13x return on investment in the clinical development process for using decentralized clinical trials. And that really came from reductions in the timeline that then translate to improvements in the cost profile. So working with Ken Getz and the Tufts Center for Drug Development provided a third-party perspective that was highly credible around the benefit of the technology and the overall methodology. So I would say, part of it is just being able to be a support in a time of need like the pandemic. And then the other is to, really take a data-driven and objective approach so that we can show that the benefit is actually real. And that also provides the learning we need to know where to double down, what's maybe not adding as much value, and then to continue to innovate in the areas where we're seeing the most leverage on the clinical development challenges like access, speed, and cost.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Michelle. And you speak of the pandemic, from a personal perspective, the work that I was doing at the time with the Gates Medical Research Institute, we had a treatment that we wanted to evaluate, and it needed to be given within 3 days of diagnosis of onset of symptoms, actually, of COVID. And we ended up, we couldn't enroll it because people couldn't get tested fast enough to be able to be enrolled. And so we ended up actually doing it completely remotely. So could you talk just a little bit more about, I would have never thought before then about doing a completely remote clinical trial. I mean, we enrolled people through social media and sent the supplies to their homes. And, so it was done completely remotely. Could you talk a little bit more about, you've touched on it, but a little bit more about how the pandemic really has stimulated this idea of decentralized clinical trials. And I worry a little bit, people are going back to their old ways of working, and I think we're missing an opportunity. So how do we get people to really even more deeply understand the benefits of what you all are offering? Yeah.
It's a great question, Penny, in terms of, when we have developed a new approach and people are seeing, that benefit, but that's a small window of time compared to the historical window of operating, right? And so I would say that, it's important that we look at the overall science and what is the problem we're trying to solve, and we take a best practices approach to those areas. So I think decentralized clinical trials is a great approach to improving the access for patients. So in every clinical trial, I think it's important that we ask ourselves, how can we actually improve diversity representation? How can we ensure that, a working mom or you name the underrepresented group can be a part of this research effort? And I think when you actually face those challenges, you realize the standard approach leaves us with not enough options. And what we see as a company now, we have a selection, we have this bias because people come to us when they have committed to solving this problem in new ways. But we have seen continued growth in the use of decentralized clinical trials. I would say what we don't see is end-to-end remote is often because, frankly, that's not the pressure that's being applied. But what we do see is that, when you look at integration of televisits, sensors, and overall more patient-centric designs, that has become more of a core practice. So one of the observations I have is I think people think DCT is retracting, but actually what I would say is it's becoming a part of the main case. And in fact, many of the studies we're running would be called ECOA, but they're actually leveraging decentralized clinical trial methodologies. So I think the core evidence generation strategy is now incorporating new technologies that address the issues around access, and frankly, the challenges you have in data collection if you're just limited to in-person on-site.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I will follow up with some more questions on that later, because I'm very excited what you said about bringing diversity to the trials and really creating access for the patients who need it. So I'll put a pin in that, and I'll turn to Robert now. Robert, again, thank you so much for calling in from Nairobi, and just congratulations on the number of startups that you mentioned that you all have invested in, and what you're bringing to the African continent. Could you tell us a little bit? What's the secret sauce? Like, how do you determine which innovators are going to be successful in the incubation program, and how do you decide where to place your investments?
Wow, thank you. It's a good question and it's a tough one. And to be honest, I kind of wish we had, that crystal ball to gaze into, and yeah, here's the winner. This one's actually going to make it. But we typically, in our methodology, we do invest quite a bit in due diligence, trying to understand as much as we can about the technology or the innovation, and of course about the team. And I think to answer your question, our secret sauce is two things. I really could attribute it to, number one, having a really good understanding of health system strengthening. So we, in terms of the African market, so we really know what the gaps or the challenges are, what and kind of that allows us to sort of have a fairly good understanding of anticipating what does the innovator need to do in order to achieve product market fit. So that really helps us to work with the perspective of seeing the end from the beginning, then working backwards. Then the second part of it is where really the magic is, because there's no science to it. Early stage investment is 100%. You're really betting on the jockey, not the horse. When all things are held constant, you kind of really need to understand who are we dealing with, who's the promoter of this idea, do they have that fire in the belly, the resolve and the drive to stick it through, because this is real life. It's a marketplace. Plan A won't work, B won't work, C, D, you're kind of getting warm. So anybody who's looking for that very quick success, they typically end up being a poor bet, because they give up way too soon and they don't persevere. And I'm sure if you were to ask Michelle, this is just the plain truth. Nothing goes according to plan, and you kind of need to have that ingenuity to iterate and pivot your idea, keeping being steadfast to your true north. So what is the problem you set out to solve? Who are you solving it for? And getting their input as much as possible to help you get the magic formula right.
Yeah. And I would love to have that crystal ball too, if you find it anywhere. As we look for new innovations here at J&J, and
maybe my trade secret. I won't share it with you.
But I love what you said about beginning with the end in mind, and also as you talked about that it's so important to see how what you're investing in, and what that startup or that company is bringing forward, how it could strengthen health systems. And could you talk a little bit more about that, and just the clinical benefit that you're looking for the organizations that you all are investing in to bring to patients, as well as so there's the patient benefit, but then what are you also looking for as far as the societal gains and the economic gains for society from your work?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and when we talk of health system strengthening, especially in the context of Africa, it's on the backdrop of a very neglected health system that is really facing severe challenges, both in terms of the clinicians. We don't have enough clinicians for our population. The infrastructure in the health facilities is either, I read a report where they were saying literally about 70% of the infrastructure is either broken down or or really old and needs to be replaced and things like that. When we were facing COVID, I remember when a lot of the focus was on ventilators, and I was telling guys, I hear you, but my main issue is, where's the oxygen? Give me the ventilator. I need the medical oxygen to actually deliver these ventilators. And there's a scarcity even for medical oxygen as an essential medicine. So that's kind of the backdrop. And to me, what I look at is asking, how do we apply, our theory of change as Bill Grow is two things. Frugal innovation, how can we do more with less? And then the second part is the business model innovation. How do we build social ventures that will be for profit, definitely scalable, but are addressing a very price sensitive market? So our price elasticity is very brittle, so to speak. So, so getting all that right requires being able to have a lot of systems thinking from the supply chain side of this innovation, because you really need to manage costs, you need to engineer and design for cost effectiveness. And then the second part is understanding where you deploy it. It's really better make the life of the clinician easier. So if it's something that ends up making, adding to their workload, they're already stretched way too thin. And that's going to be a massive failure. So it's kind of just keeping those things in mind, and then going through the normal process of iteration until you get the formula right. Then you start focusing on the unit economics and so on and so forth. But health system strengthening is really a big plus. So right now it's really about assisting and working with governments, where we're thinking of universal health coverage, primary health care, more preventive than curative. Because if we can get patients to go to hospitals sooner rather than later, what does that mean? Addressing basic issues like out-of-pocket payment. Because as long as that's there, then what you see is delayed health-seeking behavior. And so something that could have been treated with a single pill, then now starts becoming something where you probably need surgery, you need inpatient care, and so on and so forth. Can we prevent us from going down that road? Vaccines, we were having this conversation but just before the call, and that's why I was like super excited, because we really need solutions that are speaking more to the preventive side to help us make sure that our health security issues is not this big, onerous cost on the economy and on our governments. And then the second part of it is making sure that the health technologies work for a low resource setup. So a lot of times, especially like for medtech, we've seen occasions where we take the top range equipment, X-rays, CT scans, MRI, and come and basically try to implement them in countries like ours, and it failed because they were not designed with our context in mind. In issues of power fluctuations, the level of voltage that's coming to the health facility. So many things that when you're thinking about this in a place like US or Germany, Japan, you wouldn't think about those issues. So it gives us a huge opportunity to actually innovate for our low resource settings, because really nobody's doing it, especially on the medtech front. And how do we then help to look at not just the technology angle, but at the societal level? If we have the right infrastructure, the right equipment in our hospitals, it definitely brings the cost of access to healthcare lower. The sustainability aspect becomes much more achievable, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a ball of yarn that you kind of tease out, and everything's connected. But that's the beautiful part of doing this work, because there's tremendous scope for impact in so many avenues.
Yeah, I love that. And beginning with the end in mind, it's something that we talk about all the time, whether sitting here or sitting where you are, and it's so important. And also, I heard an interesting podcast yesterday that talked about adding fuel versus taking away the friction, which I love to get new adoption. And so I want to come back to that in just a moment. But I want to turn to Michelle to talk about a little bit more from your perspective and what you're doing. You already touched on it some, but I would love to hear you expand more on about the clinical benefit of your product to patients, which we talked a little bit about access, but I'd love to hear more about that. But then also to society and the economy at large. So please take it away, Michelle.
Sure. Thank you, Penny. I mean, I think that one of the kind of stark realities is just that the number of drugs approved per year hasn't really changed. And I think that's an interesting benchmark to look at over a 15, 20-year horizon, specifically like 10 to 15 years, because so many other parts of our lives have seen technology leverage. And I think that we would never want to lower the bar on safety or efficacy of drugs approved. But when you look at where the science is from a basic science perspective, and in my former life, I was a basic science researcher at Stanford, compared to where we are and what it takes to get it, into human testing and through human testing, I think we can all agree that the promise of the science is largely underrepresented in the health outcomes that we're trying to generate, because the science is really at an all-time kind of opportunity set for us to take new molecules and new therapies and have effective in human testing and to get more cures for human disease. But the bottleneck is the clinical trial, is the in-human testing. So, at Medable, when we think of the big outcome we're trying to generate, we want to go from 50 drugs approved a year to 500, and not by lowering the bar in any way, but by taking more shots on goal, reducing the clinical development timeline, reducing the clinical development cost. That shortens the time from us curing, say, the 10,000 undertreated and suboptimally treated human diseases from a 200-year timeline to a 20-year timeline. Now, that's kind of one of those like big, hairy, audacious goals that keeps a team just focused and motivated and running. The specific areas we feel we can make an impact against that goal right now are around the clinical trial conduct. So we think of kind of three areas of leverage. Speed, of course, we know that the clinical trial conduct is a very lengthy process. Scale, we know that clinical trials are largely global efforts, and there's a huge amount of complexity involved in that. And then access, which is clearly, where we look at improving the penetration and access for clinical trials into underrepresented groups and geographies. And it's the convergence of speed, scale, and access that we think will get us closer to that 50 to 500. On the speed side, it's really around improving clinical trial startup. Right now, when you look at the launch of, say, ECOA, which is how we get our primary, not the primary, but a significant percentage of the efficacy data, that tends to be the longest technology deployment against any other technology like EDC or other systems that need to be set up. So we've leveraged AI and automation to take a scientific protocol or core aspects of the clinical trial plan and science and automate the implementation of the technology, taking ECOA off the critical path, starting up sites faster, enrolling patients faster, going from 20 weeks to, in most cases, fewer than 8 weeks. And our partners are seeing extraordinary gains in that because weeks and months really matter. When you combine starting and launching trials faster with now better access and patient retention, you're talking about 6 months in some cases of a 3-year, 2.5 to 3 year process. And that's where we're getting those major speed gains. So when you think about the scale, we're able to launch clinical trials in multiple countries simultaneously, and in some cases, all of the target countries. So now you have a global go live and a faster time to start those trials up, better access and better patient retention. When I think we combine that speed, scale, and access strategy, we're starting to collapse those timelines and reduce the overall cost. we're starting to really go deep on measuring the diversity in the patient demographics. Now, that does require that we partner closely with our pharma, customers, because it's really their data. We're just collecting it. But we have an initiative on this phase 2 of research with the Tufts Center for Drug Development in a core set, a consortium of pharmaceutical companies who really want to measure the demography and the demographic impact of, digital as an access point. And so we're excited about where that research will, what it will inform and what we can learn from it. But I would say when we look at diversity and better representation in clinical trials, we're really in the early innings, and we don't have all of the data that we need at this point to answer the questions we really want to be able to answer. But I think the exciting thing is this consortium, and I would say the current direction the FDA has gone. We're partnered with the Milken Institute to establish a best practice and standards on how to address diversity plans for clinical research. I think fast forward 2 and 3 years, one, we're going to have core baseline data to understand how to address this and answer these questions. 2, one of the core challenges that we're looking at is what does good look like in a clinical trial for diseases where the population data has underrepresentation? So how do you even benchmark that? Those are some of the problems we're trying to solve so that equal to our caliber of evidence on the impact of trial cost and timeline, we have equal caliber evidence on the impact for diversity and representation. We're just not there yet with the same level of evidence.
Yeah. I love the way that you're both bringing up those themes of access and really thinking about the healthcare system holistically, the patients that need what we are innovating and trying to bring to them in a holistic way. One of the things you said, Michelle, and I love your big, hairy, audacious goal of 500 products. I mean, that's so exciting. And one of the things that I've actually been talking about with my group, in addition to the 2 hats that I talked about at the beginning of when I introduced myself, I'm responsible for vaccines, infectious disease, and global public health. I've also recently taken on a new role looking at R&D business operations here at J&J. And I've started to realize just how important it is that we be as passionate and as rigorous about our operations and our ways of working, our ways of bringing forward the clinical trials, as we are about, the scientific breakthroughs and bringing forth transformative medicine. So the vision that you have, is just as important to get those 500 products to patients as it is the initial science in and of itself. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. So back to Robert, and I wanted to talk a little bit. So I want to talk about the future and about predictions for 2024, but maybe in the context of that and some of the experiences that you've had with your startups, I want to go back to this theme of, fuel versus taking away friction. So I heard this interesting podcast yesterday, and they were talking about, our instinct when we want to innovate is to try to, you try something, you see if it works. If it doesn't work, you're like, oh, we need to do more. We need to do more. We need to push harder. We need to make the user experience better. And in fact, sometimes what the secret is to take some friction out of the system and make it easier for patients to do something. And so they were giving the business example of, this business that put forward a new company where you could design your own sofa. And they found that people were doing all the designing online, but then at the very last step, they weren't ordering the new sofa that they had just designed online. So why not? And it was because their old sofa was sitting there in the room and they didn't know what to do with it. And so once they figured that out, they said, we take away the old sofa and then they'll order the new sofa. And indeed, they started that service and their sales skyrocketed. But, as I was listening to that, I was thinking about that in the context of healthcare and also in the context of what you said about your providers that have such limited resources, and or the patients that are going to the hospital, and they might have that out-of-pocket costs that represents the friction that keeps them from accessing the care that that they so need. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about what you all are doing to kind of take friction out of the system, and love to hear, of course, more about also what you're predicting for 2024.
Well, yeah, thanks. So I've always been a big believer in the reduce the friction, and because we in Africa, when you talk of innovation and startups, most people what you typically hear about is fintech, and fintech is all about disruption, and I'm always like, hey, this is a health sector. Rule number one, thou shalt do no harm. Number two, number three, thou shalt do no harm. So we it really slows you down. But then, that principle of understanding, again, what is the ripple effect of introducing this? So it's not just do no harm, but even at systems level, again, health system strengthening, what is the ripple effect? And so to me, we really try to focus on understanding where is the friction, what's going to be the barrier for adoption for this innovation, and what's the best way to mitigate that. So in some cases, so for example, going back to the medical oxygen issue, one of the biggest challenges was within the public sector, procurement just is crazy. It takes about 3 months to order replacement for the oxygen cylinder. Now, so the oxygen is here, ready to deliver, but just the procurement system was taking too long, and the innovation in this case was to short circuit the procurement process by doing a PPP, a private-public partnership, that would allow the startup to literally just all they need to do is pick up the phone call, say we have run out, and the oxygen cylinder is switched out with a new one, and you get the billing done every 6 months. So and all of a sudden the bottleneck of medical oxygen being readily available for the patient was solved. It wasn't so much an issue of whether it's bringing down the cost or just taking out the challenge of the procurement, which the clinician, their hands were tied. They didn't know how to work around that. So there had to be a solution for them. So I really kind of fall on that side. However, having listened to Michelle and her big audacious goal of we're going to get 500 products per year, I'm thinking, number one, I really love the fact that
to get there.
yeah, I'm actually now beginning to cross over to the we can add fuel. So Michelle, you've converted me to some extent, and I'm really thinking, I do see the future for Africa, the mobile platform technology is really becoming they're already a big part of our health tech thinking, innovations, and play from community health workers who are, in essence, volunteers that are the primary level, the first entry point to the health system, to that dispensary and all the way to the district level hospital. Data portability, all this speaks 100% to the decentralized control trials that Michelle's been talking about. But it goes beyond that in terms of how do you catch issues earlier. If there's a cholera outbreak happening, how do we nip it in the bud rather than to have, the whole community really needing to be hospitalized and stuff like that. And leveraging the same for telemedicine, and now also being able to piggyback on e-commerce so that I can actually get the same healthcare at home or in the office, both in terms of FaceTiming with the physician, but also getting the drugs being sent to me, or the lab samples being sent to the lab without me having to leave my workstation or my home. So all this is really is just going to be compounding and snowballing bigger and bigger as we go forward. The other thing I want to just highlight is AI, because as we talk of this decentralization of healthcare, last mile access to healthcare, the ability to deploy AI in point of care technologies, it really becomes a very attractive aspect, because then it gives us the ability to act sooner, faster, activate alarms or public health warnings if need be, and so on and so forth. So there's so many things that I see the mobile platform and with the entire world right now, we're all talking about AI ever since ChatGPT was was unleashed on us. So I see that being a big part of the future. One last one, I think, for me is the post-COVID impact. I think initially talking about local manufacturing, and especially for things like drugs and vaccines, biologicals in Africa was like a mission impossible. And I think COVID and the issue of the supply chains, the global supply chains that we're so dependent on just being disrupted so severely, really made it clear that we can't continue on that path anymore. We do need to have some significant level of onshore innovation, manufacturing capability. And as Vilgo, what we're looking to do is actually setting up a bioescalator platform that allows innovative scientists, engineers to come in, have a co-working space, a maker space that allows them to actually just test out their ideas. And God willing, we would really want to start seeing the presence of biofoundries again within the continent that can serve, regional hub as regional hubs to really strengthen our supply chain, not just from the manufacturing or the fill and finish, as we were calling it for the COVID vaccines, but actually way upstream from the design and development of these health technologies. It's not totally lost on me that within 24 hours of getting the sequence of the COVID virus, that all the vaccines that we're depending on had been, in essence, designed. So AI is such a big driver and equalizer in terms of bringing what looked impossible in terms of the upstream innovation and then the robotics for the downstream to bear in terms of the health security for Africa. So I see us still building on the COVID experience, the silver lining, so to speak, or as we say, thou shalt not waste a crisis, becoming a major driver of transformation in terms of our supply chain, and then the mobile platform and AI.
Yeah. I love it because, we've been at the Gates Foundation, we were working for years to think about how we could, increase vaccine development and, all the way from discovery through to actual production of vaccines in countries in Africa. And to think that now with AI and machine learning, you might have the tools to really start to enable some of the areas that were most difficult to enable. It's really, really exciting. Yeah, a silver lining indeed from the horrors of the pandemic. So, Michelle, what are your predictions about trends for 2024? What are we going to see?
Just before she answers that, I want to give a cheat sheet. Just say you're also going to come to Africa.
I love it. I love it.
I love it. Well, I was just thinking, Robert, along those lines, wow, how neat it must be, to here I'm sitting in Palo Alto, and I got to experience Nairobi, what it is to wake up there and feel the community and just feel the experience of, being in such a wonderful and incredible country. So I will take you up on that.
Awesome.
So, okay, I think we're all very excited about AI. If we take a step back, what does it represent? I think it kind of comes back to some of the things we were talking about. It represents a new type of leverage, a new tool in how we can solve problems. I don't think that the problems are different, but at the same time, we may be able to solve problems that historically we were unable to, or weren't able to in such an impactful way. Two areas that I'm very excited about. One that we're specifically working on is as I was saying earlier, around the automation of some of the complexity in clinical development. So some of the, I think, less sexy but really impactful uses of AI will come from the clinical operations and reductions in the amount of manual effort required there. In our company, we look at that in terms of how we implement our software, how we get this solution into the hands of patients around the world, where these digital workflows that are capturing the evidence and efficacy data for clinical trials, used to take us 20 weeks to just manually code within our software, where we would say, okay, visit 5, do X, Y, and Z. And now we're using AI to truly take a document, go into our technology stack, an AI agent can code that entire digital workflow and actually do it with a higher degree of fidelity to the intended science, or at least as represented in the document, than a human. Because, when you're doing that for hours and hours and hours, it's exhausting. Now our team members can actually spend more time with our customers saying, hey, is this actually the right design for the patients? Do we have too many questionnaires? How can we make this more patient friendly? Could we take this visit and make it an in-home visit versus an in-clinic visit? So I think it empowers our team members to leverage this incredible expertise they have in digital and decentralized clinical trials and not spend it on the manual and rote efforts where they were spending, hours, weeks, months. So that's one area, is automation and AI for manual processes that are required in global clinical trials. The other area that I think is really exciting is in the area of digital twins. One of the challenges is, loss of data, patient dropout. I think we've seen that our technology helps on patient retention. And so I think that's one lever. Digital twins and AI to automate and understand what some of that missing data should be. And I think ideally actually replace some of the control arm participation that's required is so exciting, because I know as a physician, when I'm enrolling patients in clinical research, one of the biggest questions they have is, what if I get the placebo? Like, I'm here because I want the intervention. That's why I'm here. And I believe that we're at a point from a science perspective, powered by AI and big data, that we should be able to have the intervention is the primary place that we're utilizing the efforts of patients in this research. I think it's a moral imperative we get there, and I think it's feasible. So let's do that. So those are the two areas. I think at the end of 2024, we're going to see more AI and automation. Ideally, that shows up as faster clinical development timelines, at least from an operations and a study startup perspective. And then I hope we do see the utilization of digital twins and synthetic control arms to a greater degree, where possible. And then that also informs of what does that data need to be, and what will it take for us to create a data capability globally that is representative, is inclusive, so that we can actually have digital twins and synthetic control arms that are representative of the global populations we aim to serve. I think that will be a challenge, but it's only once we do it that we're going to really understand what that needs to be. So those are kind of the two areas I'm really excited about.
Yeah, no, that's great. And synthetic control arms have long been a passion of mine as well. Thinking about, being a vaccinologist and faced with huge clinical trials for looking at prevention, which of course I think we're all passionate about, and it's one of the most important things that we can do is prevent disease from happening in the first place. But what can we do to make that faster and less costly, more efficient? So we've talked a lot about AI and machine learning, and certainly here at J&J, of course, we're we've got 1,000 projects going on. It seems like in this area. But Robert, let me ask you, if you could just say pick your top. I'll give you 3. The top 3 areas that you would like to see, AI really applied in your startups and in Africa. What would be those top 3? Like, there's so much it seems like that can be done, but where can we get the biggest bang for our buck, if you will, from it? Oh, I think we may have, there may be an internet slowdown here. So while we're waiting,
Yeah, great
there
question.
we go. Okay, he's
The
back.
one,
We lost you just for a moment there, so I think you're back. So please go ahead. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to say, so one of the challenges that we have is still having a health system that is predominantly data is paper-based.
Yeah.
So we are still ramping up on the digitization of our health systems. But the second thing to me, like, so where I see the most immediate uh, impact is understand, building out all these insights from all the data we have in our health system that, to be honest, just sits there. And so when we're doing health programs, whether it's at the national level or the sub-national level, or even at an institutional level, we always talk about evidence-based decision making, but how true is that? So to me, I think we stand to gain a lot just in terms of thinking, going back to Michelle's point of view of processes, cost effectiveness, and being able to triangulate some of the issues that we never really see how the dots are connected. So I hope that is one of the biggest areas that we can probably do that. So key beneficiary would definitely be public sector. On the startup side, as I said, I think we are always talking about the last mile healthcare delivery. And to me, being able to think of that use case in the point of care health technologies, whether it's wearables or whatever kind of medical device we're talking about, if there is an opportunity for, again, frugal, you may count on getting a technology out there. What you cannot count on is connectivity, just like you saw right now 2 seconds ago. So the ability to have the miniaturized AI plays that can actually still work in spite of some of these connectivity fluctuations and so on and so forth. Again, these are tremendous value there, just so that you can ensure that the quality of whatever service you're providing is not being affected by these factors that you can't control.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the connectivity issues here, right here in Springhouse, Pennsylvania, too. So a desire for all of us. Well, we're almost at time. I guess I can just check real quick to make sure. Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see anything in the chat, but if there is, please, by all means, add it. And in the meantime, Michelle, Robert, I'll turn it over to you all for any last minute comments or questions that you all would like to make right now. So, Michelle, shall we start with you?
Yeah, I think, it's so exciting to just, I think, really see the leverage that technology can provide. And, Penny, when we were talking before we kicked off the recording, it seemed that, you had some really interesting new innovation in vaccine technology. I think Robert's working in healthcare innovation. I'm working in decentralized clinical trials. I guess my kind of thoughts are that how do we drive the adoption? How do we accelerate this? How do we harness technology to really make the impact we all want to make? Because we know that the status quo isn't doing enough. It's not doing enough to really move the needle on patient outcomes. It's not doing enough to reduce the time and cost around clinical development. So I'm so excited about what we can do with technology. I feel that the Galien Foundation and communities like ours are an important lever in changing the timelines for adoption, driving adoption. So I guess just a cheers to Galien in 2024 to continue to drive innovation and to drive adoption and to bring awareness to digital health, bring awareness to AI, bring awareness to the incredible innovations that are happening in drug development. And just excited to make it a great year with all the efforts that Galien has worldwide.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Robert, any final closing thoughts? Yeah.
I kind of definitely want to echo a lot of what Michelle has said, that it really does take, in Africa, it takes a village, so this sense of community and being able to understand how do we achieve more together. How do we find opportunities to tap into each other's strengths? Looking at it from my perspective, today in Africa is, like I said, it's kind of, we almost have sometimes I feel like we have a clean slate to literally build almost anything we want. We don't have any of the legacy investments in infrastructure, in what have you, that prevents us from adopting really well-designed solutions that work for our low resource setting. So that really encourages me to say, why aren't we doing more? How can we have more innovation happening? For me, I think if it can work in Africa, it can work pretty much anywhere. And it's interesting. We've seen some interesting success stories, even from the global north. One of my best, talk about feel-good story is, a professor seated in Boston, in Harvard, who designs a bubble CPAP device that doesn't need electricity to save the lives of infants that are born preterm. And we work with him and we get that manufactured here in Kenya and go to market, not just in Kenya, but in over 12 countries globally, including even back to Europe, places like Ukraine, where unfortunately the hospitals have been bombed, and all of a sudden they also needed low resource setting technologies like we do. And to me, that is the potential of being able to look at Africa as an amazing canvas where you can do things that would not make sense in settings like Europe or North America. But ultimately, you realize there's still a reverse innovation play that could still be achieved, even in spite of that. So to me, that is always the holy grail in terms of, can we get something that works for us, but also can again go through that reverse innovation path. But ultimately, just even working here, I tell people the health statistics for Africa need to change. We kind of we are at the bottom of the totem pole, and it's going to take local innovation for us to address that. And to me, the spotlight that the Galien Foundation is bringing to the innovation community really goes a long way in terms of not just validating, but also just giving us a platform to be able to say, hey, this is what we're working on. These are the opportunities. These are the innovations that we're seeing, process innovations, hardware innovations, and God willing, in the next year or so, we start seeing, biotech innovations happening that can actually not just be a solution for us, but also for the rest of the world.
Man, beautiful, beautiful. And it's just exciting to think about when I look at, all of the scientific breakthroughs that are happening. But then as I listen to you all and hear about what's happening as far as innovation in the, operational space and the clinical trial space, but then in the African health sector space, it really gives me hope for the future indeed. So early 2025, we're going to check in and see how right you all were on your 2024 predictions. But no, in all seriousness, thank you both so much for being here today, for sharing your stories and your experience, your visions. It's something that I think we all share in. And thanks to Galien for giving us this platform and this opportunity, this community to continue to share and to grow and to apply what we're doing to quite simply make the world a better place. I mean, and that's what we all strive to do, and to get those 500 products to patients. So thank you all so much. Congratulations again. Thanks to all of our guests, our audience members today. 2023, it continued to bring new challenges to our community as all the major actors in healthcare forged ahead with life-saving vaccines and therapeutics. So now as we start 2024, we're really excited about all of the novel and outstanding contributions that we're going to continue to see in these industries and from our guests here today. So just to let you know also that today's webcast will be available shortly for on-demand viewing. It'll be on the Galien Foundation YouTube page. And thank you again, and congratulations to all of our winners, and to Robert Michel, and also thank you to the Galien Foundation for hosting this webcast. So thanks everyone, goodbye, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.